All right, what is up? Welcome to a drummer's tempo workshop. We are going to go through some methods to develop more solid tempo with your playing. And we're going to talk about what our job is as drummers and how to gel that with a band. So I will never forget marching all 4 years of high school. 3 of those years I was in a snare line. We had 7 snare drums. They had to sound like one. And I will never forget our instructor working with us and saying, all that you should be thinking in your head is tick, 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 tick. And he wanted us to focus on and feel the pulse of the tempo. So there is a school of thought that says that, drums shouldn't be just like stuck to a metronome because the music should flow. And sometimes, there's dramatic increase, decreases. Look, you do what you want to do. In my experience, when I was told by a producer who took away all my drums except for kick, snare, and hi-hat, he put a speedometer on my snare drum and he told me to quit screwing around and just put down the tempo and play in the pocket. And it was very humbling. It kind of irritated me at first, and I thought, doesn't he know who I am? But this guy was a professional, and I took his advice and did what he said. And that helped me develop a much better sense of timing in my playing, and it helped me just do my job better as a drummer. And since then, I've tried to carry that into any of the playing that I do and have had a lot of good feedback from other musicians. So my job as a drummer is to provide solid tempo and pocket for the band, and it is to signal changes coming up in a song. That's what fills are for. That's what the little doodads that we throw in there are for. So what I tend to do is keep it simple. So let's go through a few ways that we can do that. The first thing that I just mentioned is putting some type of speedometer onto your drum. Now, I have an electronic kit. I have a time check feature in the TD17 module, and that allows me to play. And what it does is it senses how evenly I'm playing, how on the metronome that I'm playing. And it will tell me in real time if I'm on the tempo, if I'm getting ahead, if I'm falling behind. So it sounds a little bit like this. Okay, so when that metronome disappears in my ears, I know I'm on the tempo. I know I'm in the pocket. I can look down here. I've got it set. There's 2 thresholds. One's a little bit wider, a little bit more forgiving. I, of course, like to keep mine set on the harder threshold. That tells me when I'm right solid on the tempo. And it's a balance. I don't just stare at that the whole time. I listen. In my head, I'm doing what Mr. Peters told me to do. Tick, 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 tick. If you are on an acoustic kit, something that doesn't have a built-in speedometer, what I've found is an app that is available for Android and iPhone when last I checked, and it's called Live BPM. And what it does is it literally uses your phone or tablet or whatever's microphone, and it detects what tempo you're playing. And it actually does a really good job of picking it up. I can be sitting here just playing the pads of my kit or an acoustic drum set, and it does a pretty good job of picking out what tempo I'm trying to play, even with all the other hits going on. And it gives me a graph. It tells me what beats per minute I'm playing at, and then it gives me a graph of how steadily I've been playing. So putting a speedometer, playing on your drums, and having something that will tell you how fast, how slow, or if you're right on the tempo is a hugely useful tool. I got so much out of that. Again, when I stripped my kit away to kick, snare, and hi-hat, there was an old device called a beat bug, and it was a trigger that mounted on my snare drum, and it would just time how long between snare hits, and it would give me a number. It didn't really matter what the number was, but if that number stayed the same, I was playing in tempo. So again, there's that, I don't want to sound like a metronome or a machine gun. I want the music to be what I have found, that when I do settle into that pocket, it's the deepest feeling that I can get as a drummer. I don't feel like I'm stale or forced or like, yeah, okay, I'm tick, tick, tick. It really allows me and the other musicians, if you're playing with other musicians who have a good sense of timing, everybody can lock into that pulse. And that to me is the stuff that like gives me goosebumps. And once I get on it, it's like you couldn't knock me off if you tried. There are times I come down cold, it's, freezing, I haven't played in a couple of days, and I got to kind of warm up. But when I lock into that tempo and I really feel it, there's no throw me off. So putting a speedometer on your drums that will tell you if you're continuing to play in time is a very, very useful tool. Okay, next tool to use, a metronome. I practice every time I warm up, every time I practice exercises, I do it with a click. And so I have my whole set of exercises that I do, and I do the same thing that I do when I'm playing with the speedometer. I actually do both at the same time because I have the metronome. And then I also get that feedback. But if you're in a different situation, if I'm just messing around on the practice pad, I'll just play to a metronome. And again, what I'm doing is when I'm playing drums, like, sometimes if I'm working on something, I'm thinking about what I need to do. I'm thinking right, left, flam, whatever. But once I get my hands on autopilot, I start to listen to them. It's almost like I'm kind of third person and I'm hearing myself play and I'm hearing that pulse of the tempo. And when those two things align, like I said, it's like there's no throwing it off. So I listen for that tempo to disappear. When I can't hear the metronome, I'm on it. And when I start to hear it, and usually if I'm keeping my playing relatively simple and digging into the tempo, I stay there pretty good. A lot of times what throws me off is when I go for a weird fill that I didn't plan on, trying to be like too spontaneous beyond what I have rehearsed, beyond what I've worked out ahead of time. Improvisation, it is a huge part of music, absolutely. But when I really get into like, I'm going to do the most mind-blowing fill anyone's ever seen, I've never practiced it before, I'm not sure if it's going to work. That's when I get thrown off. So and I still have to consciously think like, keep it simple. Listen to the song, listen to the other instruments. I know the song that I'm playing it. We'll get to that more in a couple minutes. Some other things, there's a lot online. There's the internet. It's like, holy crap. You can see people doing like all kinds of crazy, like super fast blasts and things that honestly I haven't even tried. In fact, I'm thinking about doing a video of, like me trying blasts for the first time ever, because I still haven't tried one, and for that reason. So I could go in raw. So if that's, sounds interesting, throw a comment down there if you would like to see an old dog learn some new tricks. But throwing out chops and throwing out crazy complicated stuff is cool, and other drummers love it. And it's neat to watch. I'm certainly not taking away from it at all. It's tons of work to do it well. It's a lot of patience. It's a tedious process. So I absolutely commend guys that can really just, and it's insane, a lot of it. But what I focus on with my playing, to me, the most important thing is that tempo. So we tend to practice things fast. I want to get this lick as fast as I can possibly get it. Try to play things slow. Paradiddles, for instance. Okay, now turn that tempo way down. And I don't know, that's 70. That's challenging to me. There's a lot of times I rely on the momentum of the tempo in an exercise to keep it going. So when I'm playing paradiddles faster, I'm really thinking about the accents and my hands kind of do their thing. When I slow things down, it's a whole other challenge because it's like there's too much space there. So being able to play things fast is cool, but being able to play things slow as well, I would argue could be more important and it certainly can be more difficult to do because, like I said, there's so much time there where I have too much time to think. If you're curious, by the way, my warm-ups that initial tempo is like 100 beats a minute. I've had it like that for quite a long time because it's a good comfortable tempo for me, but it's a little on the slow side, so it kind of forces me to do that when I'm doing double stroke rolls as part of my thing. That's one, we'll see how it goes. But that's one that was a huge challenge for me that I kind of set out to do well, is to be able to play double strokes evenly at a little bit slower tempo. So it's to play them evenly spaced, even tempo. It's tricky. So practice with the metronome, practice things fast, but also practice things slow. Okay. The next thing that I do, again, still with the metronome, I'm trying to develop time here. I will just play. I'll just play drum beats with the metronome. I'll keep it simple. Forget about fills. And I just try and dig into the tempo and really sit comfortably in it. Pardon me, all that was muted. I'm just going to leave that open. So playing with the metronome, I settle in. I don't have to play boring. And I focus on that pulse once again. So the next exercise to talk about is, yes, thank you, Jade. My apologies. So I shut the mic off so that you don't hear the whap whap of the sticks on the pads. But then when I start talking again, it's also very helpful to unmute the microphone. So I think for this type of thing, I think I could probably just leave it open. And if you hear a little whapping on the pads, no big deal. That's better than, sitting here reading lips. So, so the next thing I do, aside from playing a beat, to a metronome, is I have a feature on the TD-17 called Quiet Count, and that gives me a metronome. I think it's I can adjust it, but it will give me a metronome for like 3 measures, and then the 4th measure, it will drop the metronome away, and I just keep playing. And I find out pretty quick if I landed right back on the beat, if I kept thinking tick, 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 or if I floated around a little bit. So If you don't have this particular module with this particular thing, there is, so the application that I keep on my phone is called Metronome Beats. And I believe that one is also Android, iPhone. I'm Android guy. And at first I thought, oh man, you have to buy like a pro version to be able to mute a bar. But here's what I figured out is that because I can kind of map out the pattern, and I just tell it to have 16 beats in one measure, and then I do this. I set it to be 12 beats of metronome, and then I go through and I leave a few open so that I essentially get the same thing. I get three measures with a metronome, and then I get one without. So hopefully the audio comes through to you for it. So this gives me the opportunity. And then the metronome comes back in, and having it drop out and then come back. And you can play around with this. Okay. You can have that continue to do it. You can give yourself, use Metro Timer. Okay, so Jade, can you do the same thing? Can you program it so that it mutes the metronome for a measure so that when you play, it drops out and you just kind of have to keep playing. So that is the point of that exercise. But that one, if you want to try it, it's free and it's called Metronome Beats if you want to do it for that reason. But this is kind of how that sounds. So let's see how it goes. Okay, so essentially you get the idea. This will tell me, ready, we're about to drop the metronome out. What I tend to do is just not even look at that, and I just try to stay in the pocket, and if it comes and goes, that's fine, and I just try to keep playing simply. So the one that I use is called Metronome Beats. Let's see. Okay, so that's quiet count. That's metronome beats, and again, I just program it so that instead of having 4 beats in a measure, I tell it to have 16 beats in a measure, and I put quarter notes in on 12 of them, and then I get a silent measure. You can alternate it. You can give yourself 4 beats, 3 measures of no metronome, whatever you want to do. So, okay, I mentioned this a little bit before. And this is simplifying the drum kit. So I talked earlier about the producer who had us in the studio, and I had my 78-piece drum kit there, and I was constantly trying to go for it. And he sat me down one night and he said, "Look, man, you're a good drummer. You've got a lot of potential, but you're trying to just blow everybody's minds and go for it all the time. Do your job. Your job is to put down a tempo, but a sexy, deep pocket tempo that people can just like sit on and groove with." So he took away all my drums. He left me with a kick drum, a snare drum, and a hi-hat. Okay, and we were also gigging at the time, so I played some gigs and shows like that. And I tell you what, it kept me from screwing around so much. Instead of thinking about, some weird fill to try and do, I couldn't, it wasn't even an option. So I had to just simplify my playing, simplify my setup. And it was one of the best periods of development in my playing. And like I said, it was humbling at first. It was hard to hear that, but it was absolutely worth it. And I also learned how to be a lot more expressive with my hi-hat, to use my hi-hat, as a crash, and as a ride. So I had to, like I said, I still had to play shows like that. And the first week or so, it was pretty challenging. But once I got a feel for it, once that was kind of my new normal, the band didn't miss anything. The audience didn't miss anything. I didn't miss anything. And all we were missing was like my distracting, like all that stuff that was just like throwing things off, and it wasn't rehearsed. And, it was just kind of that, yeah, I got to go for it. I've got to be Buddy Rich 24/7. So putting those things away, and, I could, on here, without removing things physically, I can just take away the sounds for these. I could record myself saying, ah, and anytime I hit anything besides one of these three things, my drums could tell me, ah, 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 ah. So, and then with an acoustic kit, of course, it's like you just take that stuff off and put it in the other room. And it's not to say you got to play like that for the rest of your life, but try it. Try it for, a week, a month, something like that. I think I kept that set up for, it was a couple of months of working in the studio and gigging. And, it was a great exercise for me. What's good? What's up? Account email. Good to see you. We're talking about some tempo stuff tonight. Little tempo workshop. Welcome. Thank you for coming in. Okay, so yeah, get rid of everything. Just kick, snare, hi-hat. Keep it simple. Okay, that takes care of those. So the next thing on this little list that I came up with here, listen to and play for the song. So once I've kind of done my practicing in the background with less distraction, more focused on the tempo, when I start to play with other musicians, when I'm playing drums, I am not thinking about what I'm playing. I am a bit, to a degree. It kind of gets on autopilot. But what I'm actively listening to, and like the dialogue in my head, is the song. If I know the words, it's like, and if these are songs that I'm playing in a group with, they should be pretty familiar to me. And if they're songs that I love, which hopefully they are, that's where that feeling comes from. And so I listen to the other musicians, and I know what their parts are. So, and if they're not as good at keeping time, I know what their parts are. And so while I'm playing drums, my drums kind of play on what their parts should be, and that's going to help them keep in time, if that makes sense. So, and I don't just play everything in unison, and, how to write drum parts is a whole other topic that will be covered in a different video or stream. You are the metronome, indeed. You're not the, hey, look at me, listen to this new Buddy Rich flick I just learned. So, just before I came onto this stream, I was over on Twitch. I get on there just for fun, same handle, Skittleberry, and I go over there and I just get on there when I'm going to practice. And so I kind of warm up a little bit, and then I'll fire up the cameras on Twitch because I can play like whatever songs I want, and it doesn't really matter. It gets muted for the playback, but live I can just have some fun. And so I was playing some 311 tonight, and that whole band, they all have like a really good deep sense of timing and pocket. And so that's some of my favorite stuff to play. And it's like it's hard to describe, but it's like when you get in the tempo and in the pocket with those with other musicians like that, and you know that song well, and you know what's coming up next. It's like that's where the goosebumps are. That's where it's like I'll get like choked up playing that stuff because it just feels so good, and that is the feeling I am trying to bring into the music that I'm playing. And when I feel that, it's like it permeates the whole room and everybody feels that. And it's super duper cool. Yeah, well, absolutely. Listen, like I said, a hair of flair is good when it's appropriate. But in general, if anyone's struggling with tempo, put that stuff to the side for a little bit. If when you're going to do your fills, if you're rehearsing with a band and you're playing shows, have your fills, at least have the placement of your fills kind of planned out. What I tend to do is have, after playing those songs, a couple hundred times, I know what the fill's going to be, or what type of a feel I'm going to have to it. If it's going to be like big dragging triplets or something like that, depending on how dramatic the change in the music is. And my beats, I'm not just straight, and that's fine. Like you can dig into that and have really nice pockets. So my beats are have a little bit of spice to them, but I try to keep it subtle, and I try to place my flair a little more strategically. So, it's good to have those chops there. It's good to throw it out there. Yes, I typically do. That is a great question, Jade. I've done both. When I've played with other bands, sometimes everybody's had a click in their ear. It's a very common thing. Make no mistake. There's a lot electronically that gets controlled when a band plays a show live. And a lot of times, yeah, I've learned a lot about this even just recently, but it's just about, I would say a very large percentage of the bands that love, and hear when they play a show live, they've got backing tracks synced to a click track. Everything's programmed with MIDI. When you get to a certain part in the song, the guitarist's rig can change so he doesn't have to hit 4 different pedals at the same time. So playing with a click and having other things working in the background that's based on that, if you can't keep the song together on a click track, it throws a whole bunch of the show off. So I've done both. And typically, like the guys that I play with now, and we kind of knock around and we get together and have some fun. I'm not typically, when we're just working out songs, things like that, I'm not typically playing with a click. If we're recording, if we're doing real serious studio work, yes, 100%, absolutely playing with a metronome, always. When I'm on my own practicing, yeah, always metronome. It's going, and that's totally fine. That's most professional drummers that you hear are playing with a click, and it actually, from my experience, it's more difficult to play with a click and keep the whole band together to it. It's kind of easy if you just let things kind of ebb and flow around, but to keep a song and a group of musicians on a steady pulse is very challenging. It's very difficult. So I've been in bands where everybody's had a click in their ear, or just I have. And, there's times where it's like, and I'll just reach over and shut it off because it just is, we're pulling away from it too hard. And it's like, I can't bring everybody back. So that's just kind of how it goes. But that's an excellent question. But it's a very common thing for bands to be playing with a click, or at least their drummer to be playing with a click. And again, it's not some type of crutch. It's organic. as weird as that sounds, that's kind of a paradox, but that click, that metronome is, again, when you lock into that pocket, that's how it should feel, in my opinion. Okay, what else we got? Throw those ghosts every now. Oh, listen, I constantly, like, I don't think I can play without ghost notes. I mean, they're just always going. Yeah, that's just part of, and it actually helps me kind of subdivide. So if you're not totally familiar, ghost notes, you have your backbeat typically on a 2 and a 4, and then you have just some little grace notes that get thrown around there to spice things up indeed. And I'll keep a pretty, I don't know if basic is the right word for it, but I'll keep my steady groove. But part of that steady groove is ghost notes. And like I said, that helps me kind of subdivide. Sometimes it can help because my hands are moving in more of a 16th fashion, which can actually help me to kind of stay on tempo. So yeah, ghost notes forever. I would totally recommend using a metronome live if it's being recorded. Yeah, if it's being recorded. And again, if there's backing tracks, if there's MIDI data that's controlling the lights, that's controlling gear setting changes within a song, things like that. I mean, you have to. I've just, there's a guy I watch on YouTube and on Twitch, and he's a tour manager and done just about every other job there is. Tank the Tech, pretty cool channel, but you can get a lot of insight. And I just watched one of his streams the other day, and it was, I didn't realize how much stuff was controlled by backing tracks, because people kind of, backing tracks, like you're lip syncing it. It's absolutely not what it is, but it's very important, in my opinion, to be able to play with a click and to keep the band on a click. So, okay. So we were talking about listening to and playing for the song. So I know the song that I'm going to be playing. I wish, I wouldn't get copyright striked. Otherwise I'd just like bust out a song right now. But, hop over to Twitch, look me up, Skittleberry on there, and you can see the one I just did. And you can kind of, the parts that aren't muted, if there are any, you can listen and you can kind of get a feel for, or just watch my face, man. It's like, I just, So when I love that song and I'm in the pocket and I'm grooving, that's where it's at. That's why I play drums. I don't know how else to put it into words, but tempo, pocket, and music are, okay. All right. So along with that, the next bullet point is simplifying parts and patterns. There's a threshold, and it's different for everybody. When I'm playing a song, when I'm playing with other musicians, I want to keep a good tempo. I want to play for the music. I let the music that others are playing dictate what I am playing. And if I'm having a hard time keeping things straight, I will chill out and simplify my pattern that I'm playing. If it's too complicated and I'm not good enough at it yet, I don't do it until I work on that stuff by myself. And I start slow and I learn it and I gradually get faster, and then I can bring it to the music. But I tend to keep my parts, whenever I do a stream where I'm going to be playing a lot, I get in that, like, drummers are watching this, and, all the drummers that are cool on the internet can do all kinds of weird stuff that melt your brain. And like the weird stuff I want to do that'll melt your brain is to groove well. And I think that's the most beneficial skill we can develop as drummers. Like I said, I think the chop stuff is amazing. And I think a lot of that can help when you're playing and you hear a little idea in your head. Your hands know what to do and they can go for it and they can execute it. But generally speaking, I try to keep my parts fairly smooth, or excuse me, fairly simple. So again, before I start to perform, whether it's live, whether it's on a stream, I tell myself, play simple, don't go for it, play in the pocket, and keep it together. Keep it together, keep it together, keep it together. Eddie Murphy, right? Anybody? Okay. Right on, right on. Less is often more. Less absolutely is more, man. Listen to John Bonham. Go listen to John Bonham play with Led Zeppelin. And those are some of the simplest, most dug in parts. Now, those guys they'll kind of yank around. You can't really start a metronome with a Led Zeppelin song and it's going to end up there for the most part. But John Bonham is a freaking master at just digging into that pocket. And his parts were like, he's not doing sextuplets and like weird stuff. He's playing for the song and he's playing for that groove. And he does it very well. So that's a perfect example of that. And Jeff Porcaro, yeah, I've accidentally thrown myself into a couple Jeff Porcaro incidents and songs to learn, and it's tricky, man. But practice that on your own time when you're ready to bring it to others and bring it to the music. That's when you do it, when you're very solid at it on your own. Okay. Minimize fills. This is the last bullet point on the list. And this is a big one. And this goes back a lot to what we've been talking about all along, keeping things simple. Again, the two primary jobs of a good drummer: playing in tempo, deep in the pocket, and navigating a band through a song. Fills are not my opportunity to show off the latest chops that I just learned, some weird thing, or maybe I'll just try some weird thing and derail the song. To me, a fill is used to signal to the band, hey, we're halfway through the verse. And that can be something as simple as, just like a crash or a little variation in the pattern. A bigger fill, it depends on how dramatic the change is in the music. But it's my job as a drummer to tell everybody, hey, we're going into the bridge. We're going back to the chorus. Tighten up for this verse. And we're driving the bus, man. And they depend on that. So what I use fills for is to signal the rest of the band, okay, we're going into the chorus now. If it's a big dramatic change where we're dropping into like halftime or something like that, it's going to be a bigger, more attention grabbing fill, not necessarily more complicated, but it's going to be a more, I don't know, it's just going to be like, hey. So those are what fills are for, in my opinion. I'm sure there are people already commenting on why that's wrong, and why a bunch of this stuff is wrong. And that's fine. You do you play how you want to play. I just know from being on like the kind of spazoid, like going for it, like, oh, check me out, to somebody who just checks my ego at the door and just digs into a song and a groove. I've gotten a lot more enjoyment out of it, and the musicians that I have played with have responded much better to it, and they've gotten more enjoyment out of it. And then therefore the audience gets more enjoyment out of it. So, it's cool to be flashy and have some of those things ready to throw out when it's time, but do it tastefully. If you're constantly going for it all the time, it's just too much and it's noise and people can't compute it. If you can save that stuff and do it well placed strategically, that's going to add a lot of drama and excitement to your playing. Okay, what's going on over here? Oh my God. Bonham had that awesome single gallop. Oh, dude, Bonham's just sick, man. Sometimes I look at the music and I think there are fills and extra notes put in randomly just because. Yeah, absolutely. And why? I don't know. And it depends on what kind of music you're playing too. If you're playing jazz, where it's like, that's kind of the bass line. And in that style of music, you know, I'm usually doing louder snare hits and cymbals and things like that with the rest of the band, you know, with the horns, bop, bop. And then I'm also doing fills to signal changes. So a lot of that stuff translates to any style of music. Again, I use that stuff to signal changes. Yeah, as long as it fits, whatever works. If you can pull it off, listen, look at Carter Beauford, I think is a great example. That guy's one of my favorite drummers. And if you don't know what he's doing, like if you're not a drummer and you just hear Carter Beauford, it's like, oh yeah, you know, he's a really good drummer. And he plays really solid tempo, really nice pocket, but he plays some really tricky, complicated stuff. But it doesn't sound like it. He makes it sound easy, and it's like scary. It's like, okay, you know, I have to sit down here for a month and like do it at a quarter of the tempo and like relearn my limb independence to be able to pull it off. So, you know, he can like, he's got really spicy playing, but really nice groove, and his stuff isn't quite as hit you over the head, attention grabbing, but it works for the music. It absolutely plays for the music. Oh, there he is. Do I need some coffee? Listen, I might. I've been on for a couple hours. I was over on the other platform for a while, and then, you know, I've been on here for a bit. Good to see you guys. Joe Morello. Yeah. So, let's see. Those are the things. Okay, so let's recap some things to practice, develop tempo. Practice with a metronome. Okay, practice fast. Practice slow. Practice with a metronome that will drop out for a measure or two and then come back in and see how you do with that. Simplify the kit. Kick, snare, hi-hat. Try that for a while. Try it for a day. Try it for a month, whatever. See what you come up with. Challenge yourself to simplify what's available to you and kind of forget about, you know, you got the rest of your life to, you can go back to throwing fills in every two measures if you want. But give yourself the opportunity to try and just force yourself to learn how to make the hi-hat be a hi-hat, a crash, and a ride, and just to hold it down with the tempo of the song. Knowing the song that you're playing with and playing for that song, and simplifying the parts that are played for that song. So don't try and push your skill level too far. And I have to do the same thing. You know, I'll get an idea when I'm playing for a fill that's like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. I'm not sure exactly how it would go, but you know, and if I go for it, not being sure about it, I'm probably going to throw the song off. But if I save it for practice at home by myself, then I can kind of work it out and I can throw it in there. So, listen, good luck. Any questions, put them down in the comments. Let me know. And happy practicing. Just feel that groove. And as Mr. Peters, my drumline instructor, said, all you should be thinking is tick, 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 tick. Do yourself and the musicians around you a favor and work out with a metronome solidly. Now go ahead and click here, and YouTube's going to send you to the next video you can get to work with, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much for being here.